Who is flying? The unbelievable story of Kenya Airlines Flight 507. The takeoff. The night was humid as passengers boarded Kenya Airlines Flight 507, a routine flight from Nairobi to Lagos. The Boeing 737 was filled with a mix of business professionals, tourists, and families eager to reach their destinations. In the cockpit, Captain Daniel Amondi, a seasoned pilot with over 20 years of experience, reviewed the flight plan with his co-pilot, First Officer Martin and George. Martin was younger, ambitious, and eager to prove himself. The two exchanged professional nods as they prepared for departure. As the plane taxied onto the runway, a sudden gust of wind rattled the aircraft. A light drizzle had started, and the Nairobi air traffic controller warned them of a developing storm. "Nothing we can't handle," Daniel assured Martin, easing the passengers' nerves as the engines roared to life. With clearance from the tower, Flight 507 took off into the dark African sky. The vanishing act. 30 minutes into the flight, things were smooth. Flight attendants moved about, serving drinks, while passengers settled in. In first class, Ms. Amina Diallo, a wealthy businesswoman from Dakar, sipped her champagne while reading a report. Across the aisle, James Weeksa, a nervous traveler, tapped his fingers anxiously. Then something strange happened. The plane jerked. The cockpit door suddenly swung open, but there was no one inside. The captain and first officer were gone. The plane continued flying, but the seats in the cockpit were empty. Panic spread as a few passengers saw the open cockpit door. A flight attendant rushed forward, gasping in horror. The autopilot was on, but there was no one flying the plane. Fear takes hold. Chaos erupted. People screamed. Flight attendants tried to calm the passengers, but the fear was spreading fast. "Are we going to crash?" James Weeksa cried, sweat dripping down his forehead. Amina Diallo, usually composed, stood up. "We need to stay calm," she said firmly. "There must be an explanation." The chief flight attendant, Patrick, took charge. He grabbed the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We are assessing the situation." Patrick hurried into the cockpit, scanning the instruments. The plane was still on course, but the pilots were nowhere to be seen. The door was locked from the inside before. It should have been impossible for them to disappear. Then, the autopilot flicked off. The plane tilted violently to the right. "Who will fly?" Alarms blared. The aircraft began losing altitude. People clutched their seats as oxygen masks deployed. Patrick turned to the passengers. "Is anyone here a pilot?" Silence. Then, a shaky voice. "I can try." It was James Weeksa, the nervous traveler. Patrick's face paled. "Sir, do you have experience?" I played flight simulators," James stammered. "A lot of them." Amina frowned. "Are you serious?" "Look, unless someone else steps up, we're dead," James muttered. With no other options, Patrick pulled James into the cockpit. The controls were overwhelming, flashing buttons everywhere. James's hands trembled as he gripped the yoke. "I don't know what happened to the pilots," Patrick said, "but we need to land this plane." The mystery deepens. As James tried stabilizing the aircraft, Patrick checked the cockpit camera footage. What he saw made his blood run cold. The last recorded moment showed Captain Daniel and First Officer Martin calmly monitoring the instruments. Then, the screen flickered, and in an instant, the two men vanished into thin air. No struggle. No signs of distress. Just gone. Patrick showed Amina the footage. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "Tell that to the pilots," Patrick muttered. The shadow in the clouds. James struggled with the controls as turbulence shook the aircraft. Sweat dripped down his face. Okay, I think I got it," he muttered, trying to recall everything from his flight simulators. Then, something massive loomed outside the window. A shadowy figure, standing on the clouds. Amina gasped. "Did you see that?" The shadow moved. Its form was indistinct, like a shifting silhouette against the storm. For a brief second, the cockpit screens glitched, and James heard something a whisper. "You were never meant to fly." James yanked the controls. The shadow vanished. The plane steadied. What the hell was that? Patrick whispered. Amina swallowed. Something that shouldn't exist. The desperate landing. The plane was running out of fuel. Lagos Airport was still 200 miles away. James took a deep breath. I need to land this thing. Patrick contacted Lagos Control. Mayday. Kenya Airlines 507. Our pilots are gone. We have an untrained passenger flying. The air traffic controller's voice was calm but urgent. Flight 507, do you copy? We will guide you in. Reduce altitude to 3,000 feet. James obeyed, his hands steady now. He wasn't just a nervous traveler anymore. He was their only hope. The runway lights of Lagos Airport appeared in the distance. The plane descended fast. Pull up, Patrick yelled. James fought the controls. The aircraft screeched down, the landing gear barely holding. The entire plane shuddered on impact, but they landed. People erupted into cheers, tears, and prayers. James had done it. The unsolved horror. The moment the plane stopped, the cockpit door slammed shut. A cold breeze swept through the cabin. The lights flickered. Then, the pilots reappeared. Captain Daniel and First Officer Martin were suddenly back in their seats, looking around in confusion. What's happening? Daniel asked. You tell us. Patrick shouted. The pilots were dazed. We never left, Martin stammered. James, exhausted, whispered. Yes, you did. The flight crew checked the cockpit cameras again. This time, the footage was normal. No disappearance. No shadow. Just two pilots flying.